My name's Terry Weiss, and this is my mother, Mary Stuart. And she's had a lifetime of paranormal events and houses we've lived in, lots of creepy things going on, and we're just trying to document some of that. So, I mean, she's got some stuff written down, and so do I, but this is like a video interview. And we're going to try to go back doing it house by house.
Incrementally.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. So you said the house you were raised on a farm or something?
Yeah. I was born in Deloge, Missouri, actually, at an apartment.
What year? What year were you born?
In 1941, May.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my mom and dad, when I was probably 2 years old or something or less, they moved on to a farm. Mm-hmm. And we had some funny things happen at the farm. I can remember my dad had lots of cows and horses, few horses, and he had one of those army tents, mm-hmm. room size army tent, and it was set up out in the front yard, just right up against near the fence. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of that was cattle in the field. So we go out there one morning, and Mom had an old dresser that she didn't, it was her mom's. Mm-hmm. Her mom had given it to her, and she didn't want to get rid of it. So, and there was, I guess, wasn't enough room in the house, so she put it out there in that tent and put a few other things out there. Mm-hmm. That tent was like my playhouse, because mm-hmm. they'd let me pretend. And
I've never heard this story.
So, no, I just thought of it, actually. But we went out there one morning, and something or someone had, without making noise and waking anybody up in the house, had moved the dresser to the other side of the tent, mm-hmm. and things were in disarray. I mean, there was an old trunk, it had been opened, gone through, mm-hmm. and we lived out on at the end of Doss Road in the middle of country. Mm-hmm. It was right. Kind of like it is here, kind of secluded. Mm-hmm. Anyway, my dad never figured that one out, because that dresser was packed to the max and mm-hmm. heavy. He couldn't even, without another man helping him, he couldn't even have moved that dresser. Mm-hmm. So that was weird. Another thing that happened to me that I'd like to include, okay. which was different. I remember on the Doss farm, we had a pond, and in the summertime they'd let us play at the edge of the pond, you know. And my brother was about 12 years old, and when I was little, we were playing at the pond one day, and he put his head on all the way under the water, and we had a bucket, and he came up and he poured the bucket over his head, and then he went down, and I thought he was drowning, and I was screaming, crying, running to my mom and dad. Mm-hmm. He drowned, you know. And it was just a joke mm-hmm. that he played on me, and that set me back a bit. And then another time, we had an old gray mare named Dolly, and they never would let me ride Dolly because I was only about 3. And my brother, he was about 12, 13, and he could ride Dolly, mm-hmm. all he wanted to. So one day, I keep begging him, let me, put me on Dolly. And no, you're too little. So one day, he said, all right, go up on the back porch. And Mom and Dad were nowhere around. And I said, okay. So I went up on the back porch, and he had me climb up on the railing, and he brought Dolly up, and I climbed over onto her back. Mm-hmm. And guess what he did?
Slapped her on the butt.
Yes, hard, with a switch.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, she went tearing off down through the barnyard and into the woods. And we got about 10 or 12 trees into the woods, and she ran under a limb, and it caught me right in my breadbasket, knocked me clear off that horse. And,
How old were you?
well, we moved into town when I was 5, so I couldn't have been over 3 or 4.
Little.
And that was one thing that happened. My mom used to sit up and sew late into the night. She was, especially when Daddy wasn't there. He would go over to Centralia, Illinois, with his uncle lived over there and his cousins, and so they would have carpenter jobs lined up because that's what my uncle did for a living. He built houses. So he'd hire my dad to come over. Well, when Dad wasn't home and he was over in Illinois working, my mom would sit up late and sew on the sewing machine. And she was up late one night, sewing on the sewing machine. And us kids were in bed, asleep. And she heard a knock at the door. And she said it had to be every bit of midnight or beyond. And it was very clear, knock, 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 real loud, front door. So she said, she hollered, "Oh, just a minute. Okay, I'm coming." And she put her sewing stuff down and jumped up and ran to the front door, opened the door, and there was nobody in the yard, nobody in a tree, nobody on the porch, nothing anywhere.
Nowhere to be found, huh?
Nobody, nowhere. And that she'd get a weird look on her face when she'd tell that, like like she was still freaked out. And then I'm going to go back a bit because this kind of things like this have been happening in our family ever since years before I was born. My dad got married when he was 21, and he had been married, I guess, a couple of years, and his father got tuberculosis. And back then they had no cure and no treatment. So the doctor told him that he needed to go to a warm climate. And that's the only thing he could recommend to help him. Well, my grandfather was probably in his late 50s, early 60s by that time. And he picked his 2 oldest sons. And this is back when very few people had a car. Most everybody had horse and buggy. That's how they got around. And so they turned the buggy into a covered wagon, and they headed out toward Arizona. And somehow, somebody along the way told them that Texas would be hot and dry and serve the purpose and be closer or something like that. So they wound up in the Panhandle and a place called Canadian, Texas. My grandfather passed away. And the townspeople at Canadian, when they heard that some visitors that were bringing their sick father to try to make him better, and he died, they actually brought food. They had a get-together, a burial for a like gather around type burial for him, and they actually contributed.
Kind of like a service, a funeral service kind of thing.
And they contributed money to help them get back home, the boys, because he picked his 2 oldest boys, but they were still, probably in their early 20s at best. So anyway, back home, okay, when my grandfather passed away in Texas, we had a big snow, and my mom and dad lived out in the country near Bon Terre, not for outside East Bon Terre. And they had a farm. And at 5 in the morning, around 5 in the morning, there was a rap at the door, a very loud, knock. And so it woke him up, and my dad said, "I'm coming." He said, "Just a minute." And he was throwing his trousers on. So he put his pants on fast as he could, and he went to the door. It had snowed that night, almost all night. The porch was covered in snow, the yard. There was no, he opened the door, and there was no tracks. The moon was still out and on the snow, and there was no tracks anywhere on the porch or in the yard. Nothing was stirring. It was as quiet as a mouse, and there wasn't anybody. So he came back in, and his wife said, my stepmom at that time, who was it? And he said, "I don't like it. I don't like it." He said, "I guess we'll hear something today, maybe." And so he went in the kitchen and put the coffee on. And he said, about an hour later, a rider come riding up the lane with a telegram. And he opens up the telegram, and it said, at exactly 5, and it gave the time of death, "Your father passed away in Canadian, Texas." That was the boys. They had made it to a place where they could send a telegram, and they sent it back and knew it would get delivered out to the house to let him know that he'd passed. And the time of death was exactly, because my dad looked at the clock and he said, "We'll hear something." And they did, and it matched.
Wow.
So somehow my grandfather,
Contacted them, maybe.
who else would rap on the door and there not be anybody there? Yeah. He knew my dad would put 2 and 2 together, with the time element and all. And that was my grandfather saying goodbye to one of his favorite sons.
Wow.
So we had that happen, and
Do you remember the one about your mother?
So many things. Huh?
I think she was at her sister's house or in-laws' house. She was like 19, and they were arguing, and she went out on the porch and saw that thing.
Oh yes, oh yes. When my mom and dad got married, my mom was 19 and my dad was 51. He had fathered 12 children with his first wife, and she passed away. And 2 years later, he met my mom, and then they got married. And Dad still had kids at home by his first wife. He had a family already, and a lot of them had left home, but there was still several there. And the youngest was 9 years old, and that was Pete. And anyway, the oldest one, though, was a year older than my mom. She was 20. And she did not like my mom. She didn't like the idea of my mom trying to, I don't think she'd ever really given up. Her mother was gone,
Right.
2 years, that's not a lot for her.
Right.
And so she couldn't resign herself that that's the way it was, and I guess hadn't accepted it. So it was on a Saturday, and her name was Leona, by the way, and she was my half sister, and her and Mom had gotten into it over some little petty thing in the kitchen or something, and it led to a shouting match. So my mom, being a little hot-headed, she just said, "Well, I ain't going to fight with you, blah, blah, blah." And out on the front porch, she just stormed and sat down in the rocker on the front porch. And she said she hadn't no more than lifted her head. And in the front yard, about halfway between the fence and the porch was a beautiful, tall, white angel with beautiful white wings that came way up behind her. And she said, and I said, "What did you think?" And she said, "Well, I didn't have to think. I knew that was her mother, and she'd come to tell me to not fight with her daughter."
Oh.
And she said, "I just stared at it, and it stared. It was looking right into my eyes." And she said, "I got the feeling that if I took my eyes away, that she'd be gone, and nobody would ever believe me." And she said, "So I hollered." She said, "I hollered at Leona." She said, "Leona, come here, come here." And Leona didn't. She thought it was a trick, or
Yeah, she
she was
wasn't
still
having it.
mad, and she didn't come right away. So she said, finally, she said, "I moved over to the door and I rapped on the door and I said, 'Somebody come out here. You gotta see this.'" And she said, the minute that I even batted an eye, it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "But I got the message. I knew exactly what I needed to do."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Leona and I came to terms right away."
That's
And
good.
yeah, but Mom would get chills up and down her. You could tell her voice would change and almost crack when she talked about it. Seeing an angel, that is so special.
Of course it
That
is.
almost, very few people ever have that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you another kind of funny story out at the farm, that same farm. My little baby brother, he must have had a guardian angel watching over him, because we had this milk cow, and it was a little red brindle and gave good milk and everything. And every morning, Mom would uh, holler for her, and she'd come running, and Mom would bring her up in the yard, and she had a step stool, and she'd milk that cow, come out of the house with the bucket. Well, my baby brother was a toddler, probably about 8 months old, 9 months old, just learned to walk
Mm-hmm.
just he could toddle pretty good. So anyway, she comes out and she sets the um, stool down and the milk bucket, and the cow. There was something about the bucket wasn't right, or some reason Mom had to run back in the house. So she left and run back in the house to get, maybe the bucket wasn't clean. She had to get another bucket. So she came back out, and before she could come back out of the house, and she wasn't gone 2 minutes, my little baby brother had toddled out into the yard, and I'll never forget it. He was so carefree and just toddling, across the yard, and that cow's horns was a little curved horn like that.
Was this Denny, Alvin, or Marvin?
It was Alvin,
Alvin.
and she had a little curved horn about that big,
Mm-hmm.
and so she had run at him and put her head down and went like that, and I watched her scoop him up, and she threw her head up, and he grabbed them horns like this, and he's sitting there with his feet dangling and got a hold of them horns. And so she started into it like maybe I could do something with this,
Yeah.
and she's going like this back and forth.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I yelled, "Mom," and she come running. And oh my God, I could almost hear her heartbeat all the way across the yard. She, she said, "You put that baby down, you old heifer."
I can see her doing that. It's funny.
And she ran up, and I think she grabbed his tail, and it stopped, and it put its head down and just went like that, one little at the ground level, and he went tumbling out,
Not hurt at all.
completely unhurt.
Wow.
And but it was the most. I'll never forget it. It was so different.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
And
that cow could have killed him.
Oh, I'm
She
sure.
could have gone into a run and tossed him or anything
Mhm.
she wanted to do.
I'm sure.
It was weird. But anyway,
Skip ahead to Grandma Rue's house with the loud noise in the kitchen cabinet
oh my
that we
God.
were talking about earlier.
Well, there's another thing I wanted to tell you before. Um, when I was 5, we moved into town, and Dad sold the house. Well, bought a house. He traded Harvey Williams a sow and 7 pigs and a milk cow and a team of horses
For the house?
for the down payment
Oh.
on the house. It come to $750 in livestock because
Wow.
Harvey wanted to start farming, and
Mhm.
Dad was done with it, and he
Mhm.
wanted some peace in town. So that's what happened, and we moved into the house in town, which I really loved it. It had fruit trees all over the place and flowers growing in the yard, and just it was really homey and been taken real good care of, and I loved it. But anyway, um, you brought up about
The kitchen, the
the
dishes.
kitchen, but before that even we had oh, here's another thing on the spiritual side of it. I had my mom's brother Ezra and his wife had 2 little boys. They lived in Irondale, and Irondale is about, oh, I want to say 10 miles or more from our house in Esther, Missouri. And his wife Betty was about to have their 3rd child, and so um, back then they had children at home a lot. And so my sister Evelyn, um, she was probably 12 or 13, 11, 12, 13. And she had volunteered to stay at my grandpa's house and kind of assist if she could, help her. Because we didn't know when it was coming. They didn't know for sure when it was coming, but we knew it was pretty, coming close to time. So my sister wound up being over there when the baby came. And uh, Betty was only 22 years old, and she had the baby. It was a little baby girl, and right after the baby was born, um, the doctor got there, but it was too late, and Betty was throwing up blood. She burst the lung, and she was dying.
Oh gosh.
And it was about 4:30, 5 in the afternoon, and when Betty died, and we were at our house over at Esther, Missouri, a couple of towns away, and we sat down to the kitchen table to eat a meal, and everybody got seated, and Mom was starting to pass things, and a knock on the front door, loud and clear. All the kids, I'll get it, they're jumping and they're going to run to the door, and Dad said, no, 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 stay put, your mom will get it. So Mom got up right away and went to the door. She opened the door, and there was no one there, and there was no one on the street, the sidewalk right in front of our house. There was nothing, nobody nowhere. And Mom had hurried to the door. I mean, it was just a few steps. And so we went back to the table and was starting to eat. We ate our meal, and we didn't even finish that meal, and the phone rang. And it was my sister Evelyn, and she was crying, and she said Betty died.
Did the baby make it, or
The
was
baby
it
made
delivered?
it. The baby made it, but Betty had died right after the baby was born. The only thing she got to say to her husband, Ezra, was take good care of the children, and she died. And she got to see her little girl. She got to see her, but that was it. And but the timing, my God, that was like right when we heard the knock on the door, you know. And my sister, she didn't think immediately to call us, but a few minutes after smoke cleared and that, she called us to tell us, and
Sure.
it was so obvious. It was just so obvious. Betty was saying goodbye,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a strange thing that doesn't happen often. And then you fast forward well, oh my God, um, my mom wound up living there after I left home and got married, and um, my dad had passed away when I was 13, and then I got married when I was 16 and lived in the city. And my mom was there, and she let my two brothers, Alvin and Dennis, live with her because she didn't want to be lonely, and they needed a place, so they lived there still. And so, but they didn't always do exactly like mom wanted them to do, or she'd call them for a meal, and they might not come for 5 or 10 minutes till they got done whatever they was interested in. And one evening like that, there was nobody home but her and Denny, and he was out working on the car. And so she got the meal done, and she went to the front door and she hollered, "Denny, come and eat." And he hollered back something, okay, and so she went on in and sat down to eat herself, and she thought, well, what's keeping him? And so she got a little mad, perturbed that he didn't come on in and eat. So she thought, I'm going to see what he's doing out there. So she goes out there, and the car was parked very near the house. And so she went up to the car. She didn't see Denny. She opened the car door, and she saw something in the car,
I remember
something
this.
dark. And she opened up the car door to tell Denny off. And she said, a cat that had a head as big as a human's head, right about the same size, was sitting in the passenger seat, and it turned and looked at her eyeball to eyeball.
Like a demon or something.
Yeah, like a demon. But she said it had cat's eyes, yellow up and down eyes, eyeballs, and didn't seem friendly at all.
So what you do? She freak out and
Oh, she screamed and came running into the house. And when she got in the house, Denny was in the house. And she said, you know, she couldn't even talk really at first. It was so. And he said, what's all the yelling about? Like, why? But she never forgot it. She didn't like cats after that.
I can see why. I remember that.
Yeah, that happened. And then mom wound up in her 80s. She just turned 80, and she had a stroke, and she was paralyzed from the waist down, and so we couldn't talk her into leaving and coming and living with Evelyn or me, either one of the older of the sisters. And I tried, and Patty tried, my younger sister, and mom kept saying over and over, no, Daddy bought this house for me and the kids, and I'm not leaving it. I'm going to be here till I die. And so she was in, we had her bed set up in the right-hand front room. There was 2 front rooms and 2 back rooms. It was like a cracker box, 4 rooms. And her bed was by the window in the front room. Then there was a doorway across the room from that, and then you went into the kitchen, and the sink was up against the back wall leading to the backyard, and there was a window here and a window there, corner windows. So one day I was down there. We'd always go down and visit Mom as often as we could, and every week definitely, and sometimes more. And so I was in the kitchen doing dishes. My brother Dennis and um,
I was with you on that trip.
and Patty and Terry was there. I brought Terry with me, and they were talking to Mom at the side of her bed, and chit chatting. And suddenly, the loudest boom I've ever heard inside a house went off. It sounded like a gun going off, even louder, because there was a percussion about it, almost like a bomb going off.
Yeah.
And so my back is turned to the rest of the house because I'm facing the sink and doing dishes. And the minute it happened, I swung around and just in time to see on the wall behind, across the tables here, and then the wall of the kitchen, and then the doorway going into Mom's room. Okay, but that wall of the kitchen was covered with cabinets, and they went all, way up, and all of our dishes and glassware and everything was in there. Well, when that bomb went off, that boom like that, or it just reverberated. Um, every dish in that cabinet, every door flew open at the same time, and every dish piled out and into the floor. And the side of the room, if you're going down past the cabinets and going to the left in the corner, every room in that house had a chimney that all the rooms shared. It was right in the middle of the cracker box, and so because that you could put a stove in any room that you wanted as long as it was in that corner. Well, about I don't know 6 foot up on the wall in that area, there would be like a cap lifter, I want to say.
Looked like a paper plate.
Like it looked like a
Similar.
paper plate, but it was metal, and it had a painting on it. Somebody had painted every one of them, with a scene. That had, at the same moment the dishes come flying out and the boom happened, that flew out of the wall, and onto the floor. And I was in shock. I really didn't know what to make of anything. And I ran to the door of the bedroom and I said, "What did you do?" And they're at the same time
She
saying to me,
something.
"What did you do?" And they said, "We didn't do nothing. We're just sitting here talking to Mom." And I said, "Oh my God," And I looked, and the cover of the chimney from that room was also in the floor. And they came in and they said, we started picking up the plates and the cups. Nothing broke. That is insane. On a hardwood floor, something falls from 6 to 8 feet up and nothing breaks out of a whole set of dishes. Nothing broke. That was unbelievable, and I know nobody believes it, but
I was there, I believe it.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, Terry can verify. There was
was-
nothing broke.
It was scary.
I mean, I was trembling when I picked that stuff up and set it on the table because Mom was asking what broke, and I told her nothing, and
Mhm.
we was glad that
Yeah.
nothing
Well,
broke.
yeah.
But at the same time,
Like what
how
caused
does
it?
that happen?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
It was weird.
yeah, that was beyond weird to me. There's just never going to be an explanation for something like that. And then, oh boy,
Where do you want to go next?
I don't know. What are you thinking?
Well, what about on Reynolds Creek Road? During the summer when you had
Oh, okay. Well, that wasn't really
Yeah.
spirit related,
No.
but um,
Just tell it really quick.
it was unusual.
Yeah.
When we lived on Reynolds Creek Road at Hillsboro, 3 miles outside of town on Reynolds Creek Road, it was, I had kind of halfway split up with my husband, and it was just me and the kids. And I cooked dinner one evening, and we went to bed. And I put the kids to bed about 8, I guess, and I laid down by him to get the baby to sleep. And the kids fell asleep, and I'm about to fall asleep, and I heard the most ear-piercing scream I've ever heard in my life, and it sounded like a woman who was being murdered or something. It was really, really loud, and it sounded like it was right there in the house with us. And I didn't know what to think. I mean, I thought demon or wild animal, whatever it is, it's here in the house. And so I made sure the kids were like well covered where they wouldn't be noticeable. And it was dark in the room. You couldn't see anything. So I laid there all night long. I did not get a wink of sleep. My heart was racing most of the time. And I was never so glad to see daylight coming to the windows. And it was really quiet. Kids were still asleep. I didn't hear anything anywhere. And I thought, it's laying low, whatever it is. So you better grab something and go looking. So I picked up something. I don't remember what it was, maybe a baseball bat or something. And I went creeping around the house. I looked in every closet. I looked everywhere, and I could not find anything out of place or anybody there. So I thought, oh, maybe it left, whatever it is. Maybe it just slipped out the door. And so I got the kids up, and I was still really in shock over it. And I got the kids up, and we went to the neighbor's house, which was across the field, but doable. And the neighbor's husband said, um, I'll go back to the house and check it out inside and out to make sure it's safe for everybody. You want me to do that? And I said, yeah. So he went with me. And the first thing he did, he said, where was your bedroom? And I said, this window right here is my bedroom window. And he walked up to it, and there was a set of animal prints on the screen where it had pushed its claws right into the screen.
Because the window was open, right? It was summertime and the window was open?
Yeah.
Except for a screen?
Except for the screen. The window was open. And it had pushed its nails right into the screen, and there was tracks down below where it stood on its hind legs. It just went up there and boom, like that, and that's when it screamed. Maybe it couldn't get its claws out of the screen or something. But anyway, it was, and he said, oh, that's a mountain lion. He said, I know what that track is. And he said, he came up to the window and stood up. And see, I didn't hear anything before that. Yeah. I mean, I didn't, just the scream. And the reason it sounded like it was in the house is because he was right there behind my head in the window. And so anyway.
I thought he said like what you cooked that night brought it in.
Oh, absolutely. I fried pork chops for dinner. And I had left them sit out on the table what we didn't eat, and just the frying of meat that time of evening when an animal hasn't had dinner yet and they smell it, they'll come down out of it. And behind our house there was a mountain that lit a hill, but it was more of a mountain than a hill going up behind the house. And at the foot of the hill there was a little stream, and it had come down out of that mountain because it smelled those pork chops frying. And you know the smell of frying pork chops. It'll carry in a breeze, especially for a very sensitive animal. But that was highly unusual.
Go to the Lucas farm now.
Huh?
The Lucas farm. The Lucas farm up on the hill.
The Lucas farm. Oh my God. Okay. Well, eventually we moved to the Lucas farm, on P Highway, and near Festus, and the Lucas farm was built in the style of a southern mansion. It had the really wide concrete steps going up in a half circle in the front, and it had a hallway. When you opened the front door, that you were in a hallway that was, you could have made 3 rooms out of the hallway. It was very wide, and then it had rooms on both sides, upstairs and downstairs. So
Yeah, 5 bedrooms upstairs. That's why we got it. 'Cause
yeah,
we had a big family.
5 bedrooms upstairs. Anyway, my son Jerry, he went out the back door one day. At the end of the hall was the door going to the back yard, and he goes out the door and slammed the door behind him, of course, and there was a transom up over the front door and the back door. And this transom had a piece of glass the width of the door and about maybe, 20 inches high.
Every bedroom had that.
Every bedroom had a transom over the door. And he goes out the back door, walks straight into the yard, and right behind him, it missed him by seconds. It hit, the transom came out and hit the concrete and busted all up. But he said he felt the wind of it right behind him. It was almost like it was trying to hit him. And at the same time, he was having these nightmares. And he was the only one out of all 6 kids we had. All 7 kids were there at that time.
Yeah.
And none of them was having bad dreams except Jerry. And it was a recurring nightmare that he would have. And this old elderly woman was pursuing him and trying to trap him, trying to kill him. And she had something, a knife or something in her hand she was going to kill him with. And maybe it was a hatchet. Anyway, he got to where he didn't even like going to sleep at night because he was afraid he'd dream that dream again. It was very frightening. And about that time, he came in my bedroom. This is the uncanny part of it. We were still in bed one morning. I guess it was a Saturday, and he wanted to ask permission to do something, ride his bike outside or something. And he was about 5 years old at that time. And we said no, whatever it was. Go back to bed, and Mom will be getting up in a little bit. And he walked back out of the bedroom, and he didn't even shut the door behind him or anything. He didn't even, there was no slam, no nothing. And as soon as he stepped into that hallway through that door, the transom came out and came down and crashed on the floor right behind him. And when he told me how close it was, the back door, the way it happened, I kind of halfway didn't believe him. I thought, you know.
So this is the second one that came down?
And it was, both times it was Jerry. You know, I had other kids that came in and out of my bedroom. Why would it be always him, you know?
I was the only one that had a bedroom upstairs.
Yeah.
And nothing.
The rest of them slept downstairs. Yeah. And so that was telling. I mean, I started to think, I don't trust this house. And I'm starting to trust what he's talking about in his having those bad dreams. Because why him, you know? Made no sense. And then, so we, there was another thing. At the top of the stairs, there was a sheet of plywood that you could pull over and close off the upstairs.
During the winter.
In the winter time, and then all you had to heat was the downstairs. And Terry was staying, I think you were staying with Aunt Allie and Uncle Lloyd anyway.
My bedroom got moved down.
Your bedroom got moved downstairs.
In the hall.
Yeah, in the fall.
In the hall.
Yeah, in the
downstairs.
Hall. So um, we had a phone, and we had it in the kitchen. Well, the phone would ring, and there was an old phone upstairs that
Upstairs, yeah. An old
wasn't
dial
even
phone.
connected. It was a
Mhm.
dial phone, and it wasn't even connected. I don't think we'd ever used that phone at all.
Mhm.
And it probably was there when we moved there. Anyway, I'd be downstairs doing something, and the phone would ring upstairs. And by
Mhm.
the time I got the wooden plywood pulled away from the cover so I could get upstairs to get it, it would stop ringing.
Yeah, I kind of remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing was we moved.
Mhm. And you went
And
back to clean.
and yes, and I wanted to get my deposit back. So I worked at Carter Carburetor at the time, and I was driving back and forth. So this was on a Friday night, I believe, and I did my best to get it all done. They said have it done by Saturday because they wanted that key back.
Mhm.
And I was looking forward to getting my deposit back. So I brought a mop and broom and some cloths and everything I thought I needed, and I swept everything downstairs, and I came to that stairway going upstairs, and the somebody had removed the I guess they had to move some furniture from up
Mhm.
there, and they had left it open at the top. The plywood wasn't on there. And so I thought, boy, these stairs, they need swept down. I know they need it swept. But I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to go up there at all. But I thought, be an adult. And so I took my broom and I went to the top stair and I started sweeping. And I didn't look right or left. I just swept the stairs. Kept moving down the stairs slowly, one at a time. I got to the bottom step, and I guess it's human nature, but I had to glance up.
Mhm.
And when I did, a shadow went over from one side of the stairwell to the other up on the landing. And I mean, I saw it with my own eyes. I couldn't. It was it was like somebody that had a black cloak had swiftly just gone across there, right in
Mhm.
front of my eyes. And I froze. My heart like to jumped out of my body. I grabbed that broom and pail and I ran the hell out of there, and I didn't do any mopping. I That was it. And
Mhm.
I threw that stuff in the car and bid farewell to that house. And we had only been moved out of there for about a year, and that house burnt to the ground. They rented it to somebody else, and
Tell
it
them what the fireman said. They had chickens or something on that little porch, and that's what caught the house on fire.
right,
So when the firemen, well, you were at a yard sale, and these people mentioned that they lived in the Lucas farm. You got to
right,
talking about the Lucas farm
yeah.
and tell them what they said about the house when
And
the
they
firemen.
said when that they couldn't put the fire out, and of course the house burnt to the ground. And they said some weird screaming sounds came out.
They kept asking these people, "Are you sure there's no one else
Are
in
you
the
sure there's no
house?"
one else in there?
Mhm.
And we found out before I even moved from there that my neighbor told me, who owned the house that we rented from. And once we told them we were moving, I guess they didn't mind telling us everything.
Mhm.
They said they had moved there. Her dad had moved, his dad had moved there, his family from Tennessee, I believe it was, by covered wagon. And they bought that land and built those houses. And then when the parents passed away, there was two brothers that stayed in the house that we rented, and uh, one of them hung himself in the upstairs bedroom that was Terry's bedroom.
I thought it was the daughter, like Hallie. She got pregnant. She was a little touched in the head and
Well,
got
yeah, they
pregnant.
had a daughter, and she had gotten pregnant, but she didn't kill herself.
Oh.
But her brother hung himself in the last room over, and that would have been your bedroom.
No, it was across the hall.
Across the
Trust
hall.
me, I know this. It was the middle bedroom across the hall because there was a big hole in the ceiling where all the the stuff had come down.
Oh,
Redid it.
right. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But
It was a creepy house.
yeah, it was an amazing house, but
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately,
Not quite the Gone with
creepy.
the Wind house that you described it as being. I was a little disappointed when I got down there. But it was a cool house, really big. Okay, so let's go to the Russell house in town
Oh,
with
yeah.
the oval door.
With the big red door.
Mhm.
Yep. We lived in a house on Russell Street, and we had some things happen. Terry lost her jewelry one day. Well, she didn't lose it. She was
No.
going to lay out and get a suntan in the front yard. So she took all her jewelry off. She didn't have a lot of jewelry, but her necklace was
Well, this
gold,
was all stuff Chris had gotten me. It was gold.
gold
Stuff
necklace
Chris had
and
gotten me for
a ring and some stuff.
Christmas, birthday, 2 or 3 necklaces,
Uh-huh.
bracelets, and all that.
So Terry always made her bed. And her room was always
Spick and
neat.
span.
Yeah, she's a neat Nick. And so to lay out, she took off all of her jewelry and she laid it right in the middle of the bed, thinking nobody will bother this because nobody ever comes up here. And so she goes out and lays out for a little bit. And when she went to get dressed, she went to her room and looked, and her jewelry was all gone. There was nothing there. And she went back down and she looked in the yard and she thought, maybe I just thought I left it on the bed. Maybe it's in the yard where I laid. So she goes out there and looks all over where she'd been and there was no jewelry. So
And I'm
she asked
panicking by now.
everybody, and we said, no, Terry, we thought she was daft or something because she didn't usually, lose things.
Mhm.
And so she pitched a little bit of a fit. Somebody had to have gotten it. I remember specifically, I laid it right on the bedspread. So to be sure that, nothing, she's not seeing things, she went up and took the bedspread off the bed and shook it out. She took the other sheet, shook it out. Nothing anywhere. She looked all over her dresser and everywhere, and it wasn't that her jewelry
I
wasn't
made multiple trips to the yard and up to my room.
both
Yeah.
trips. So she made her bed back and came downstairs, and she wasn't very happy. And then, I don't know, in a little bit, though, she eventually went back up. And when she went back up, I guess it was to go to bed that night.
No, I was still looking for my jewelry.
Oh, you were still looking for it.
Mhm.
But she goes back up, and it's not in the center of the bed, but it's near the end of the bed, and it's laid out in rows like this, straight little rows of the necklace,
perfectly laid out.
the bracelet. It's all there. And like somebody is getting a big joke out of it. You know what I mean?
Like a poltergeist.
Like a poltergeist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do that. They move your stuff.
And then it got to be prom night, and Angie was there, and Clay Kapler, and Chris, and Terry, and they were all going together to prom. And
Well, before that, things had started happening in the house, and we kept telling Dad something's
yeah,
ghostly in this house, and he said, "Oh, you guys are nuts. I don't believe in that stuff."
yeah.
And we kept hearing knocks on the door, and there wouldn't be anybody there. So go ahead.
Well, anyway, they got ready to leave though, and they wanted to take some pictures before they left. So, we stood them in front of the couch and we took pictures and everything. And then they said, "Well, that's it. Let's go." And so Clay was standing there with his hand on the doorknob. He'd been waiting to open it so they could all go out. And there was a knock on the door, real loud.
3 times.
Everybody heard it, knock, knock, knock. And Clay automatically, just as soon as it knocked, he opened the door. And there was nobody there. And he stepped out and looked around, and he said, "There isn't anybody here." And we said, "Oh, there's got to be." And so him and Chris Halsey walked around the building all the way to the backyard, looking up and down the alley, and nothing, no cars, no people, nobody was on that block.
And Dad was sitting there in his easy chair and saw the whole thing happen. And I looked at him and I said, well, now are you a believer? And he was speechless. He didn't know what to say because he saw it.
Your grandpa
it.
did not know what to say that day.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then I worked at KFC and got home early.
Yeah.
I had to go to the bathroom really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only one bathroom upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? You were downstairs cooking? And I ran in and I said, Mom, whoever's up there, tell them to hurry up. I'm about to wet my pants. You said, well, there's nobody in the house but me and you. I said, I'm telling you, someone's up there. So you went upstairs with me, and the bathroom door was locked and water was running.
Yeah.
So you used the key to get in, and we
Yep.
opened it, and the water was running, but there was no one there. And
No
it was
one there.
locked from the inside.
And nobody had been there.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Weird. Really, that was very weird.
Let's see. Where to next? You want to go to Natalie and the ball?
The what?
On the house that they turned into a golf course. You were getting ready for work, and Natalie saw that.
Oh, that's the biggie.
Yeah.
Well,
no, that's not the biggest, but it's a biggie.
I think it is.
Okay.
I think
It is pretty cool.
definitely is.
Go ahead.
When I worked at the nuclear plant and I had to be there at 7 in the morning, I would set the alarm for like 5:30 and get up and roll my hair, whatever I had to do, and then get ready for work and leave and be over there by 7. So I get up early, and the kids, we had a couch that led out into a bed, and we had company that night. One of the cousins stayed all night, Sean, and so the couch was let out, and I let the girls sleep on that bed, and I let the boys sleep back in Denise's room because she wasn't home that night. So anyway, I get up, and I was getting ready, and Natalie woke up. And when she woke up, there was an arch that led to the dining room. You could see everything in the dining room right through the arch, mostly. It was a really big archway. And so she is all excited and giggly and laughing. And I said, what are you laughing at? And
this is like 5 in the morning?
Yeah. And she said, that. And she pointed. And I looked in the dining room, and it looked exactly like it did the night before. No, wasn't nobody in there, nothing. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, that thing there above on the table, that ball on the table. And I looked, and I said, there ain't no ball on that table. And she said, oh, yes, there is, and it's changing colors, and it's so beautiful. And she said, it's moving. And Natalie was about, 5?
Oh, no, she was about 7.
7?
Yeah.
And Crystal was about 5,
Mm-hmm.
5 and a half. And so Crystal was still asleep, and Natalie kept going on about it and how pretty it was and everything.
It was getting bigger and then smaller.
Yeah, she said,
size.
it's getting bigger, it's getting bigger. And she was friendly about it. She wasn't afraid of it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost have to believe she was communicating with it in some way, back and forth. But anyway, I looked several times, and there just wasn't anything in the dining room. It was partially dark and partially just the light coming from the living room. And so I had to get ready. So I went ahead and I went in the bathroom and taking the rollers out of my hair and stuff. And I came back, and Natalie had woken up Crystal. I believe she woke her up because she wanted her to see it. And so she's still going on about it. And I said to Crystal, do you see anything in the dining room? And she looked, and she said, no. And I said, nothing unusual? No. And Natalie said, oh, you do too. You see it right there above the dining room table. You see it. And they almost got into it over it because Crystal said, "No, I don't see it. You know, what are you talking about? There ain't nothing in there." And my instincts kind of went a little, you know, at that point, and I thought, well, that's weird that one sees something and the other don't.
Yeah, because Natalie didn't make stuff up.
No, and Natalie was the kind of child that she never made anything up. That she wasn't a trickster at all. Never did go out of her way like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew she was seeing something, but obviously I couldn't see it. So I thought, I wonder if I could feel it. So I said, I'm going in there. I'm going to find out what you're talking about. So I walked up to the table, alongside the table. It was a big round table. And I put my hand, I said, right here is it? And when my hand was about to the middle of the table, Natalie let out a shriek and she started crying and she said, "No, Mama, don't touch it. Don't touch it." And so at that point, I didn't want her crying, and so I said, okay, I've got to get ready anyway. I got to go to work. So I went in the bathroom, sprayed my hair, and while I was fidgeting with my hair, I said to Natalie, I said, uh, "What's it doing? Is it still in there? What's it doing now?" And she said, she giggled and she said, "It bumped down to the floor and it followed you in the bathroom." And I about dropped my hairbrush, I swear. I got the hell out of there. And I said, so the boys woke up. They heard the commotion from the next bedroom and they wanted to know what was going on. And I asked them, "Is there anything unusual in there, a light of any kind?" And they go, "No." And so Natalie said that it went in, when they came out of the bedroom, that it went in the bedroom. So when John heard that, he said, we'll just check this out scientifically. Come on, Sean." So they go in, they're going to prove, Natalie's making things up or something. So they go in their bedroom, and there was nothing in there. And they walk up to the closet door, and they opened up the closet door, and a blast of icy air hit them right in the face, and they jump back, and they come tearing out of the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "I don't know what is wrong with this house, but there was something in that closet." He said, they was looking at each other. "Did you feel that?" And "Yeah, I felt it." And so I had to leave. I asked Natalie where it was, and she said it went back. It came back and went above the table. And so I had to leave, and that was the hardest thing I ever did, was going to work that day. But I knew we needed the money, and I knew that they don't hold with last-minute cancellations at the nuclear plant.
Mm-hmm.
And so so I left. I kissed my kids and walked out and got in the car and drove away. And as soon as I got to work, I got on the phone in the hallway at work, and I called home. And I talked to, I had them put Natalie on the phone. And I said, "Where's the ball now, Natalie? Is it still there?" And she said, "No, Mama." She said, "After you left, it went from window to window to window, from the back dining room, all the dining room windows, and the living room window, and then it came back the other way and was looking out each window." And she said then it got to the kitchen, and she said it went right on down the stairs, bumped down the stairs, and went out through the kitchen window and disappeared. And that's the last we saw of it. And she was describing this ball like this big around, and it would get a little smaller, and then it'd get even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And it was changing shapes, changing colors.
Yep, I remember that.
Yep.
Okay, unless you can think of something else off the top of your head, do you want to go to the most terrifying thing that you've ever encountered?
Um,
Unless you can think of something else.
no. The the most terrifying thing that ever happened was when I was about 8 years old in um, the backyard, a front yard.
House you grew up in.
Yeah. Pardon me. My two brothers and I, my two younger brothers and I, was playing tag in the front yard, and it was mom and dad were home. They were in the house, and it was late in the evening, but the sun hadn't set yet, and so there was a tree on either side of the. There was a sidewalk come from the outer sidewalk by the road. There was a sidewalk that came up the middle of our yard into our front steps, and on the section on the right hand side there was a big tree and then a smaller tree on the left side, and it was an oak tree. Yeah, I'm sorry, it was a maple tree. They were both maples, and from the tree in the front yard, you could see past the house. The tree on the left side, you could see past the house and all the way up to the barn. So, anyway, we were playing tag, and we'd been playing for an hour or so. I mean, we were really going at it and laughing our heads off because they couldn't catch me. And I loved being it and running from them, you know. So, um, my brothers were hot on my tail and about to tag me, and the base was the tree on the left hand side. So I ran past it, threw out my right arm, grabbed the tree, and swung around the tree to stop myself because I didn't want to get hurt and hit the tree. I was going too fast. So I did that. I threw my hand out, grabbed the tree, and swung around. And when I swung around, I saw something. It standing in the, well, I say standing, it was in the path that went from our backyard all the way up past the garden and all the way up to the barn. So I couldn't figure out what it was, and my head was down. I had swung around low to the ground, and I went to right myself, and as my head came up and I righted myself, I realized it wasn't what I could even imagine it was. It was something else. It was humanish, but not human. It had eyes, but not our eyes. It had red eyes. And they weren't just red like plastic eyes or something like that. It was alive. Whatever it was alive. And it looked like a skeleton. The head of it looked like a skeleton that had big holes for eyes, and like someone had taken two red embers out of a fire and set them in the sockets. That's what it looked like. And the embers glowed on and off, in and out, like a fire ember in a flame.
What was it wearing?
In a like if you're burning wood.
Yeah.
And it happened so fast. It was instant. And it had a robe over its head and was wearing some kind of a long robe. And it seemed to be like silk because the wind was lightly blowing, and I could see the material moving over it, hanging over its hands, but moving in the wind a little bit. And worse than that, it saw me.
Was it floating or on the ground?
It was floating. It was too high up above the ground not to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have had legs 4 foot tall. And nothing has legs that tall. So anyway, it saw me, and it was alive, and it looked at me. And as I righted myself and stood on my feet, I almost collapsed. I screamed. I went into a scream that I didn't even know it was me screaming. I could hear somebody screaming, but I didn't know it was me. And um, whoa, whoa, whoa. I got some kind of a communication, but whatever it is, I can't remember what it was. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. But it, it was like I thought it was going to extinguish me any second. Any second. It was not there to do good. I just knew that. I don't know how I knew it, but it was like I was going to get extinguished. And what happened was I went into there's a term for it, but I'm not sure what it is.
Screaming fit?
Huh?
Screaming fit or
They,
shock?
they call it this when someone is so frightened that they lose control of their body. It's called the screaming memes.
Mm.
And you scream and you're bouncing up and down. Your feet don't know what your brain doesn't tell your feet to do it, but you're so scared that your body is just reacting like you're bouncing a rubber ball up and down, up and down. And I was jumping on the ground, up and down, screaming bloody murder, and I couldn't move. That's why I was so paralyzed with fear. I couldn't run away. That fight or flight thing kicked in, but I couldn't run. I had no body control to run, and I'm just screaming and jumping up and down, and I locked eyes with it, and I was that frightened. If I'd have stayed in that state very long, my heart wouldn't have took it. I would have been dead on the ground, and I know that. But I had the fear that that thing, whatever it is, it's not here for good. It wants you, or it's going to kill you on the spot, and I didn't know which. And that's how it was, and scared the hell out of my brothers. And the oldest one, Marvin, he went tearing in the house, made my dad come out there, and my dad come running, and I'm still out by the tree, just jumping up and down, just can't control anything. And so my dad got me and brought me over to the steps, and he hauled off and slapped me so hard. I'd never in my life been slapped like that. But it was almost like he hit me with his fist, but it wasn't his fist, it was his open hand. And it brought me out of the shock. But even when I come out of the shock, I was terrified beyond belief. I mean, I had full memory of what had just happened. And I jumped in my dad's arms. I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I hadn't done that ever, I don't think, since I was a baby. And I just jumped in his arms and locked around his head, and I thought, take me in the house. That's what I was thinking. Let's go in the house. Get me in the house. But he didn't. He said, I want to know what's going on out here. And my brother Marvin said, she saw something. She saw something. And he said, where? And he said, over by that tree. So my dad didn't put me down. He kept me, and he walked over to the tree, and he said, now where? And they said, up there. She saw something up at the house, past the house. And so my dad had me in his arms, and I'm screaming, no, Daddy, don't go up there, don't go out there, don't, no, 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 no. And I was just that terrified that my dad would be extinguished, and both of us. And so my dad brought me back to the stairs, and he said, run in the house and stay in the house. You boys get in the house. Don't nobody come out here. So he grabbed up ball bat or something, and he went around the house immediately and up into the backyard and followed that path all the way up to the barn, opened up the barn door, nothing in there. He even went to the neighbors across the alley to the other house and knocked on their door and asked them if they seen anything. Does anybody see anything walking around here? Anybody walking around here? Anything at all? Nope, nobody's seen anything. You know, he didn't stop to even tell them what was going on or anything. And it totally vanished, and it never came back. but I was never able to forget it. It wasn't of this earth. That was
Right.
that I do know to be a fact. It wasn't. It was too um, bizarre. And when I went to when I got a little older, though, and I saw comic books and I saw the Grim Reaper,
Mm-hmm.
that's the closest thing I can tell you because it had a nose, but it didn't have a nose. It had a nose, but it was like somebody chopped off the whole end of its nose, so it was just like two
Bones.
bones, sockets, like a
Mm-hmm.
sockets there, and its eyes were. It didn't have regular eyeballs at all. It had the framework for an eyeball, but its eyes were embers, something that was like it was talking with its eyes or something. It's strange, and all my growing up years, I kept thinking, why me? Why did I see that? And I don't hear any other kids ever saying they saw anything strange like that. And I started listening to radio and then TV and waiting to hear that somebody saw something similar to what I saw that scared them really bad,
Mm-hmm.
like it scared me.
Mm-hmm.
And I never came up with any match. And I can't be the only one. This is a big earth,
Yeah.
big.
Right.
So that I want to get hypnotized and regress back to that day. And I'm not going to tell the hypnotist anything about it. I don't want him. I don't want anybody that hypnotizes me leading me into something.
Right. Right.
But if I could go back and relive that, now that I have had a lot of research
You sure you want to do
behind
that?
me, I could probably identify more what it was about. And if there was any kind of communication, maybe that would come back. Um, it was so ugly, but it wasn't the ugliness that scared me. I've seen ugly before,
Mm-hmm.
deformed things in people,
Mm-hmm.
but no, it was the eyes. It was, and its hands. It had real long fingers that, like that robe was halfway covering its hands and loose in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
It draped underneath and was kind of blowing behind its fingers, but it had really long fingers, and it 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 wasn't of this earth. I can tell you that. It maybe from a different dimension, or but why my backyard? It was just a plain old backyard where the garden
Yeah.
spot.
I don't know.
Not
I don't know. It's unexplainable.
no, and I really gave up trying to explain it, but I would love to hear if anybody else had a experience like that. Um, we could compare notes. At
Mm-hmm.
least I wouldn't be the only one.
Right. Well, that's probably a wrap up for now, unless we can come up with more at another time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start making a list of mine too.
Oh yes, Terry's got some experiences. You want to? Yeah,
Yeah.
hers are even more interesting than mine.
I don't know about that. I don't know if I could top that one. But we'll have to do that another night. I'll make my notes. They're definitely some crazy stuff.
And there was only, and he didn't see it. Marvin didn't because after I screamed, the boys backed off. They didn't want to see whatever I was looking at for sure.
And it could have been for your
But
eyes only, you know?
yeah, but Daddy run them in the house too.
Mm-hmm.
But they know what happened. They was there. They witnessed me screaming and bouncing like a rubber ball,
Mm-hmm.
and Daddy having to slap me broadside to bring me out of it. And when Daddy walked back in the house, I remember my mom said, um, what happened? And my little brother said, she saw something. And Daddy looked at Mom real quietly and he said, I don't know what she saw, but she saw something. He believed he knew I wasn't making that up. You can't make that up.
Right, right. But did you describe it to him after you calmed down?
Yeah, I told him what it looked like. And he's a God-fearing Christian,
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
still, he knew. He knew that I had seen it. He couldn't deny it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like when we lived on in the big 3-story house on Adams Street.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting in a chair. No, I wasn't. I was sitting on the couch. I was sitting on the couch, and you went out the archway, and right there was the stairway going upstairs.
That was Cool House. That was Cool House.
And we had a white cat, Jerry's white Siamese cat. I love that cat. Keekers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sitting right there on the rug in the room where I was. And it was asleep, but curled up in a ball, sound asleep. And for no reason at all, that cat shot straight up in the air. And when it came back down, it hit the floor and its paws were going like this, like for dear life. It ran out that room and up them stairs, and I've never seen that cat clear stairs so fast in all my life. And I don't know if it had a bad dream or if it actually did see something. But I wasn't paying that much attention to the cat, but I knew it was laying there asleep. And to just shoot up in the air the way it did, just all 4 feet, boom, and up in the air, and then and he was gone. It was amazing to see. I don't know what happened to that cat, but something direly did. Scared the hell out of it.
Well, they say that animals can see stuff that we can't.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's on YouTube. Some guy, his dog would go to one side of the room and just stare at the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this will have to be continued. If you think of anything else.
If I think of anything, I'll jot it down.
Yeah. Because I'm sure there's more.
Oh, there is. I'm just hitting the highlights, seem like. I can tell you a story that was told to me by a man named Phil McCarran that used to temporarily live with us when
That's a good one too.
He was a friend of my dad's, and they worked together doing carpenter work with my uncle up in Centralia. And he lived there in Flat River area. His family was in the Flat River area. He was an older man, not as old as my dad, but older man. And anyway, he stayed with us from time to time when he needed to, a weekend or just a day or two. And he played guitar, and he could sing a little bit. I mean, he wasn't like movie star type or anything like that, but he played guitar, and I loved guitar music. And we used to sit around and listen to him in the evenings. It was entertaining. But he could tell stories, and he told us a story. And you could tell by the way his eyebrows went up and literally made his hair stand on end. I mean, he hated telling it, but he couldn't help himself.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that back in the 30s, when everybody was broke and they had that crash and nobody had any money, he used to travel.
Like the Depression?
In the Depression.
Okay.
He used to travel and get on those trains,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd ride the trains, and then they'd stop wherever they thought they could find some work, or
Mm-hmm.
Or raid a farmer's field or something,
Mm-hmm.
get something to eat. Well, he said they were camped out, 4 or 5 of them, around a fire one night, going to catch the morning train kind of
Mhm.
thing. And he said he had to go to the bathroom. So he gets up and walks into the woods a little piece, go behind a big tree. And he said the devil appeared to him right when he was,
relieving himself.
yes. And boy, he would slow down though, and you could tell that it was really traumatic for him to even tell it. And he said he had horns and a tail, and he said he only said 2 words to Phil. He said, "You're mine."
Ugh,
And
those are words you don't want to hear from the devil.
I know. And Phil, he drank when he got paid. If he worked and got paid any money, he'd always get a little fifth of whiskey, a little small bottle of whiskey. And I think he had a guilty conscience about that. And he didn't go to church, but he was a good man. And but he said, the devil said, "You're mine." And he said, I tore out of there. He said, I didn't hardly pull my pants up. He said, I just got back to that fire as fast as I could. And I said, "Did you tell the other campers what you saw?" And he said, "No," but he said, "I didn't never do that again and walk away from a fire where there's people." He said that, that just gave the devil he couldn't resist talking to me. And yeah, I believe him.
There was only,
It's hard to make stuff like that up.
well, when I sold Kirby's door to door, that short time when we came back from Florida, we moved back from Florida, and I sold Kirby's door to door. Well, Charlie forgot me at this house. He was off helping other people. And so I was at this couple's house for maybe 3 hours.
3 hours?
I had already demoed their carpet, did everything, and we were just sitting there talking. And she said, I guess I'm just easy to talk to, I don't know, but she said, "I'm going to tell you something that we don't tell very many people." And they were Christians. And she said that her and her husband, when they were younger, and became Christians, got into church. And she said one night they were in the dining room, I think, and she said out of the bedroom walks the devil, like horns the whole bit.
Yeah.
Red eyes, tail, just like this guy described it. And it was huge. She said it was really big. And it walks up a few feet from him, and it looked at her husband and said, I forgot her name, Karen or something like that, "She's mine." He claimed him, And she said the only thing we can figure out is that he was testing us, our religion, like, is God going to save you? One of those things. But anyway, she said, we don't tell people that because they think we're crazy,
Well, how did they make him go away?
That I think she said it just walked back out, same way. But
they could have. All they had to do was say Jesus' name out loud.
Maybe they did,
Yeah.
But she went in and got me a brand new Bible and gave it to me, and she said, "There's a reason you're here, and you got stuck here. There's a reason for everything, and I want you to have this Bible." I've still got it.
Well, that was nice. Yeah.
But that's the only time I've ever heard somebody seeing the devil besides that one.
Angie.
Oh, that's true. That is true. That's one she needs to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that scared her to death. Anyway, I think we're done for tonight. Yeah, it's weird, all these things.
Oh, I can think of one.
What?
When we lived on P Highway, the farm, that old mansion that we lived in,
The Lucas farm?
The Lucas farm, yes. The kids would get off the school bus, and there was a wheat field between the house and the road where the school bus went on. School bus would let them off at the road, and then they would walk up that wheat field to my house.
We'd take a shortcut straight to the top of the hill to the house instead of walking all the way around on the road.
Right.
Yeah, it was a shortcut.
The road curved around, and they'd shortcut through the field. So one day they all got off the school bus and they arrived at the house, and I said, "Where's John?" And John was what, in kindergarten?
Mhm.
John was in kindergarten in our first grade, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
First
But
grade.
young.
And so I said, "Where's your brother?" And they said, oh, he's here. He was with us, and he wasn't there. We looked all around, and he wasn't there. So they go back down in the field
We went looking for him.
and went looking for him. They looked in the barn. And they looked down toward the bus stop, and they got part way down there, and there was a gully
Mm-hmm.
where water would wash down, and it was the low spot in the field. And he was laying in the gully, sound asleep,
Which
in,
is so abnormal.
in a dirt gully.
Because this is the same field that I stepped on a snake.
Yeah.
Like I was walking up the hill and felt something moving under my feet. When I looked down, there was a snake all coiled up. And I shot straight up in the air and came down running ahead of the snake. But they all knew that story. They knew there were snakes there. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine him laying down and just going to sleep at all.
And did he wake up normally? I mean, you shook him?
No,
or?
I had to wake him up.
Huh?
I had to wake him up.
You had to wake him up. But that no kid does that.
No.
I've never.
No, when the house is right there, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I never let my kids stay up late at night. I mean, even if it was deprived of sleep, it wouldn't have been to that extent where he just lay down in a dirt gully. That's stupid. He had to have passed out and fell or something,
Or
or got taken.
you know more. You know my theory. I think he got taken. I do.
But why would they put him in a gully? That's a stupid
knows?
place to put a person.
They wake up all over the place. Who knows? No rhyme or reason, but that's my thought.
Yeah. Well, at least we got him back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That explains how he is, though. Maybe.
Huh?
That might explain how he is now.
Yeah. I got a feeling he's changing.
Yeah, I don't know. But that was weird.
Oh. I might as well. Is it still running?
You got 11% battery left.
Okay. Well, I'll try and make this a little shorter. I was in the hospital, had a baby,
That's a good one.
and it was not my usual hospital where I like to have children. It was City Hospital because I had already we had the first one, and I didn't have the bill paid completely on the first one, and then I go to have the second one, and I said, or the third one, the second one wasn't completely paid for at the hospital, so I didn't want to run another bill, so I went to City Hospital, and I didn't know it, and if I had it to do over again, I guess I wouldn't, but I went through the clinic at City Hospital, and I had a 10-pound boy, Jerry Lee Jr., I named him. And after he was born in the, what do they call it, the
Operating room? Delivery room.
delivery room, yeah. After he was born, they wheeled me out into the hallway, and they told me to rub my stomach. And well, so that I know what that's for. The placenta has
Right.
to come out.
Right.
So she told me to rub my stomach, and so I tried. I was so tired and wore out, and I was rubbing. And I remember she came by again. She grabbed my hand. She said, "Rub that stomach, or you'll die. Rub that stomach." So I rubbed harder, and then I passed the placenta, and everything was fine. And I'm laying out there in the hallway, and they brought the baby to me and put him in my arms. And he was blonde and clear as a bell, didn't have a mark on him anywhere, broad-shouldered little thing, and I was so happy. And I started to cry. And the nurse come by, and she said, it was a black lady, and she says, what you crying for? And I said, oh, my dad. I said, if my dad could only see him. And uh, while I was saying that, my navel, I was still in pain from having the baby, in shock, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But my navel felt funny, like somebody poured warm syrup in it. And it felt great, but and it started radiating out in all directions to my toes and coming up. And I heard this voice, and it wasn't the lady. She left. The lady that said that to me went on through a door. But I heard this voice, and it said, "Well, don't you know he's here? He sees him. He's looking at him right now." And then it dawned on me, possibly, my father could be here seeing this baby. Of course, he wouldn't miss it for anything.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I couldn't see him, but I knew he was there. That and that warmth that just covered my body, like somebody just poured hot honey all over me. And
And wasn't there another lady giving birth, and you said something about she she doesn't know the Lord or something about religion? And it said, "Are you sure?" Remember?
oh yes,
That's the eerie part.
that was when Denise was born. Yes, I had her at St. Luke's, and I was for some reason a little concerned about my health or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it come time for the baby to be born, I was a little afraid. And I'd had, what, 3 other kids already, but I was a little bit afraid. And they had my bed in my room, was up against the wall, and I couldn't see it, but there was a cross on the wall right at the top of my bed, but I hadn't seen it. So I'm laying there thinking, boy, I could die tonight, and I got all those kids. What am I going to do? And uh, and then they came in, they checked me, and they said, "Yep, you're ready to go. Let's get her to the maternity room, whatever they call it, delivery room." So they turned my bed around, and as they did, I saw the cross. And I'm saying to myself, "Oh, you're worried about nothing, silly. Um, this is a Christian hospital. They'll take good care of you. Don't worry." And I hadn't no more than thought it. Um, uh, it was followed up with this thought in my head. But I'd heard so much bad about Catholics,
Mm-hmm.
about,
Mm-hmm.
and this thought in my head was, but did they even know the way? Jesus, did they
Mm-hmm.
even know the way? And boy, I didn't get way out of my thoughts. Do you know the way? Do they know the way? I'm thinking. And God intervened. And this voice that I don't know where it came from, it was booming, but it was gentle. It was female, but it was male. It reverberated through my whole being, and piled it into my head, and it said, "Do you know the way?" Very stern. "Do you know the way?" And oh my God, that broke me. That just broke me down. I started crying, and I said, "I may die tonight, but that's okay because I know Jesus and He is the way." And they wheeled me on out. Oh,
No, it said, "Are you
it
sure?"
said, yeah, it said, but this happened like boom, boom, like
Mm-hmm.
a knife being thrown by somebody. It happened so fast. But do they know the way? Do you know the way? And this "you know the way" was very loud, firm, and not coming from my ears.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear it with my ears. I heard it all around me. "Do you know the way?" And then I said what I said in my head. Um, I may die, but that's okay because I know the way. I know Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And um, That was it. That was the,
Then it said, "Are you sure?"
yeah. Are you, oh, yeah. And it said,
You
are
told me
you
that.
sure? But it was the way that it was happening so fast, at the speed of thought. I didn't even get one thought until another thought, hit me. And this wasn't, this last one, do you know the way? And are you sure? It was not coming from me at all. It was coming from the ether. And, and yeah. And when it said, are you sure? That's when I said, yes, I'm sure. I am sure. And so it's okay. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die. I don't care. It's okay. And that was a little miracle right there. I've never heard such a, but since I've been watching those NDEs, I heard one woman say that almost identical thing happened to her. She was dispelling somebody else or some other entity, and God reproved her about it, like
Questioner.
yeah, like what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't think somebody was doing enough for God or something, and this voice said, "What are you doing?"
Like she's judging someone
Yeah,
else.
do not judge. That was a do not judge. But yeah,
Thanks, Mom.
and I feel sorry for everybody that hasn't actually had a straight out experience with God where He actually spoke, even if it's 2 words to them, so they know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Bible it says, "Blessed is he who hasn't don't have any proof and believe
Has to
with
go on
their
faith alone.
yeah, with faith alone." So I guess it's not really for us to have uh, concrete evidence. Then we wouldn't be making a decision about Christ on our own. We'd be doing it for selfish reasons. So,
Yeah. It's one way of looking at it.
well, God does say, He give us full choice. We can make
Free will.
free will. Yeah, free will. And but it sure was reassuring. And I really thank God for it, because I can openly speak about God, and it doesn't. There was a time when I was reserved about that, but I know I'm on solid ground, and I'm not bashful about it anymore.
Well, good.